Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going over my top 5 fantasy football best ball drafting mistakes. Inside of today's video, I'll be going in depth into 5 mistakes that I believe that a lot of people could be making in their best ball drafts, and I believe these are mistakes that could end up drastically hurting your roster. So before we could get into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you leave a like on today's video. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my top 5 biggest best ball drafting mistakes. So we will begin with the biggest mistake, which is a mistake people make in redraft fantasy football, in dynasty fantasy football, and in best ball fantasy football. And that is simply just not understanding the rules, just entering into the draft, and just assuming that you know all the rules, assuming that this is a full PPR draft, assuming this is a half PPR draft, assuming that this could be a 6-point per passing touchdown draft or a 4-point per passing touchdown draft. All of those league settings drastically change how you are going to be approaching any given draft, and best ball websites aren't just the exact same. Now, our sponsor, UnderDog Fantasy, we are going to be discussing some of their rules in today's video, but if you play on other best ball websites, then the settings are going to potentially be different, so you need to make sure that before you enter in a draft, that you go through and carefully scan through the rules, just like you would want to do in your fantasy football drafts. For redraft or for dynasty fantasy football, for example, UnderDog, the sponsor of today's video, they use the half PPR setting with 6 points per rushing or receiving touchdown and 4 point per passing touchdown. For some fantasy players, that might be the normal. Their at-home league, the league they play with their friends, the league that they play with a bunch of random people online, that might be the settings. 4 point per passing touchdown, half PPR, 6 point per receiving or rushing touchdown. But for some people, their fantasy football league that they play at home might be completely fucking different. It might be point per rush. It might be tiered PPR, meaning half PPR for running backs, full PPR for receivers, and 1.5 PPR for tight ends. There are a lot of different ways to play fantasy football, and depending on the league you are in, depending on the best ball website that you are on, that is going to change on any given website. So it is very important to understand the rules, because otherwise you are going to be drafting completely wrong. For example, 6 point per passing touchdown leagues, in my opinion, level the upside of the rushing quarterbacks, because in a 4 point per passing touchdown league like UnderDog, the best ball format, that is the sponsor of today's video, that we're going to be talking about in a little bit, on their format, if you run in a touchdown as quarterback, you get 6 points. But if you pass a touchdown, you get 4 points. So the quarterbacks that have the upside, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, a bunch of other quarterbacks that can run in touchdowns, their upside is a little bit higher because of those bonus points you get for rushing in touchdowns. Does that mean you should be fading quarterbacks who are fucking statues in the pocket like Tom Brady or like Aaron Rodgers or other quarterbacks in the NFL? No, but you have to understand how the scoring settings can affect every single player. So please make sure before you go into any best ball draft, hopefully you're doing them on UnderDog, you read the rules. There is also super flex drafts on UnderDogs in which quarterbacks are put at a very high premium, because now you will be starting basically 2 quarterbacks every single week. So people are going to be drafting more quarterbacks. The strategy is going to be changing. And in the first round, there might be 8 quarterbacks taken, which is fucking insane to do in a 1 quarterback league. So you need to make sure that you, before you do any kind of draft, best ball, redraft, dynasty, that you look at the rules before you go ahead and head on into your draft. The second biggest mistake I see people make is misunderstanding the value of running backs. In redraft, many people, including myself, go into most drafts. Now, you can't just put yourself into a fucking box and just follow that rule set, but most of the time when I go into a draft, I'm thinking, if the value falls to me, I want at least 1 running back in the first 3 rounds of the draft. And for many people, they might also think I need 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds. And that is because finding a top-end running back is very difficult, leading to the first round being heavily dominated 50 Shades of Grey style by the running back position. This is also the case in best ball. There's going to be people drafting running backs early and often in best ball, but what you have to understand is that in best ball, You aren't determining which running back to start every single week. The computer does it for you at the end of the week. After you already have these guys play, they put the best players in. So if you draft in the first 3 rounds, 3 running backs, you could have potentially have found a running back getting similar value later on in the draft by just drafting a bunch of running backs later on. Guys like Melvin Gordon, who would make you pull your fucking hair out week in, week out last year, were great for best ball because they had, or he had, I should say, the upside to have an amazing game and had multiple great games last season. So when I say this, I'm not telling you guys to just start fading running backs, right? Don't draft running backs if they fall to you, just to not draft running backs in the first couple of rounds. I'm not saying that. I'm also not saying that you should go the 0 running back build in every single draft. What I mean is that you need to understand that that bias you probably have towards attacking the running back position from years, potentially, of playing normal redraft fantasy football needs to be pushed aside because you can find a lot of value later on at the running back position in a best ball league that is going to be much harder to do in a redraft league because it's very hard to just put some random running back you drafted in the 13th round into your lineup and just assume they are going to play great, whereas in best ball, if you do this anchor running back strategy where you draft a running back in the first round and then you wait a little bit later and then draft a bunch of other running backs, then you don't have to worry about figuring out which of this smorgasbord of running backs is going to end up playing well. The computer just automatically puts the best one in. So again, I want to hammer home that you can draft multiple running backs early in best ball drafts. You can definitely do that. But if you do that, I want you guys to make sure that you are pushing away from the running back position a little bit later in drafts if you're going to do that. And a big strategy in redraft fantasy football, and something that I try to hammer on home to the audience when I'm making redraft videos, is to draft more running backs than wide receivers. It's pretty easy on the waiver wire to go ahead and walk on over there and pick up some fucking wide receiver. That could be amazing any given week. But that's very difficult to do at the running back position. It is. But in terms of best ball, where there is no waiver wires, there is no trading, you're stuck with the team you got. So you want to understand that drafting a bunch of running backs totally on your team when you got to be starting more wide receivers, you're going to be starting more wide receivers most weeks. It's just a little bit stupid in my opinion. So if you guys have any questions on what I'm saying, if it doesn't make sense to you, I understand that I'm kind of going on tangents here talking about these mistakes that you could be making in your drafts. Please make sure that you leave something down below in the comments and I can further cement my point and make you guys understand what I mean by each of these points. So again, to recap the first 2 points, not understanding the rules, that's a humongous mistake, as well as misunderstanding the value of running backs in best ball compared to in redraft fantasy football. But before we could get on into the next point in today's video, I'd like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at UnderDog Fantasy. UnderDog Fantasy is known for their NFL best ball tournaments. However, UnderDog doesn't stop there. UnderDog has plenty of other contests for you to compete in, including live draft contests and pick'ems in which you can net up to 20 times your entry fee. Please use promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO. You can go ahead and also just click the link in the video description to get up to a $100 first match deposit bonus. Get started on UnderDog Fantasy today, and hopefully use all of the tips that I give in today's video. The third mistake that a lot of people make in best ball drafts is handcuffing your running backs. In best ball, your ceiling comes from your players staying healthy. And when you're doing these drafts, I just assume, now it's a crazy assumption, right? Not everyone's going to fucking stay healthy, but you just got to assume, you know what? These guys are all going to play 17 games. That's what I'm assuming. Drafting your own running back's handcuff is basically you telling yourself that my running back is fucked. He's going to get hurt. And that you need that handcuff. If your running back does not get hurt and miss serious time, then that selection was terrible. It was terrible. Because you are handcuffing yourself. You are handcuffing the ceiling of your team by doing that. Drafting other players' handcuffs, right? Say you draft Christian McCaffrey, and then you want to go ahead and draft Tony Pollard, right? You don't have Zeke, but you draft Tony Pollard. Perfect. You don't have Dalvin Cook, you draft Alexander Madison. That's perfectly fine in my book, and I'm excited to do that. But when you are handcuffing your own running back in best ball, to me, that is definitely hurting the ceiling that your team has. Now in redraft fantasy football, there are people that are for handcuffing and against handcuffing. I'm personally more for handcuffing. I'm not going into the draft saying I need to handcuff my running back, but in a redraft fantasy football draft, I might fuck around and actually handcuff my running back. But in best ball, I really do believe that it handcuffs your own team. It hurts the ceiling of your team, so I'm going to go ahead and fade my own handcuffs in best ball fantasy football. Next up is number 4, and that's not keeping bye weeks in mind. Now, we all know that guy who, in our fantasy football redraft league, fucking drafts 10 guys that are on bye week 7. And everyone makes fun of him in the draft. You dumb motherfucker. How did you draft this many players on bye the same week? And then you get to that week, and guess what? He has like 3 players on bye because trades happen. The waiver wire happens. So I don't think you need to put this huge emphasis in a redraft league on paying attention to bye weeks. But in best ball, you have to, at least in my opinion, in the quarterback and tight end position. And the reason why I say this is because if you're only going to draft 2 quarterbacks, if you draft 2 quarterbacks that are by week 9 comes, then you are getting a big fat fucking 0 at the quarterback position. And those points, that could be 25, 30 points potentially, that you are not getting are going to bite you in the ass at the end of the season when you don't have enough points to qualify to get into the playoffs. That is going to hurt you. Same thing with the tight end position. You only draft 2 tight ends, 3 tight ends, and all of them have bye week 7. I don't know if I used 7 as the last example, but you get what I'm saying. Then you are severely hurting your team that week, and that could be the reason why you don't make a bunch of money at the end of the year. So make sure that you are definitely paying attention at quarterback and tight end. At running back and wide receiver, it's definitely a little bit looser, so I wouldn't say that you need to really be locked and loaded in because you're going to have a lot more running backs and wide receivers than you do compared to quarterbacks and tight ends. So again, to reiterate my point, when you're looking at running backs, receivers, you don't have to be focused in on their bye weeks. But definitely for quarterbacks and tight ends, you need to make sure that you're drafting them on different bye weeks. This is also the case in redraft. It is. But again, in redraft, you can make up for that. Whereas in best ball, you can't just pick up someone or make a trade. So the final best ball mistake, and this is probably the biggest mistake aside from just not understanding the rules, and that is reaching on stacks. One of the biggest points people discuss in best ball, and for good reason when they're talking about and discussing best ball draft strategy, is stacking, meaning why you draft a quarterback that goes with your receiver, your tight end, multiple receivers, multiple different positions, why you want to stack teams, and that makes perfect sense, and that is why people take down these fucking gigantic prize pools like an underdog. Year in and year out is because they were able to get that stack, and that stack is important. But what you don't want to do is reach on your stack. For example, you draft Dak and CeeDee Lamb early on in your draft. But then you want to go ahead, since you got Dak, you got CeeDee Lamb, you're like, you know what, Gallup's the wide receiver 2 for the team. I want Gallup and I want Schultz. So instead of waiting to the 10th and 11th round to get Dalton Schultz and Michael Gallup, you pull the trigger in the 7th and 8th round. And you might be thinking, hallelujah, hallelujah, I got my stack. I got the fucking Dallas Cowboys stack. Let's go. And that's all fine and dandy. And you can make yourself believe that, oh, since I reached for the stack, it's okay. But in reality, most people aren't hell-bent on getting Gallup and Dalton Schultz if they don't have Dak Prescott. So there's a pretty good chance that you could have just waited to where their ADP is. Maybe you reach 1 round instead of reaching 2 rounds, and you go ahead and get them. So don't reach on these players just to complete your stack. So let me know down below in the comment section if this video was helpful to you. Let me know down below in the comment section if you have any best ball mistakes that you've made in the past that you've seen players make that you believe needs to be talked about, because maybe we fuck around and run this video back and do it again in the future. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that like button, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and make sure you check out our sponsor, UnderDog Fantasy. Again, they're known for their NFL best ball tournaments, but they got a lot of other stuff as well. They have live draft contests, as well as pick'ems that you can net up to 20 times your entry fee. Please make sure you use promo code Awesemo or click the link in the video description to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy!